Humans of Earth, welcome to Will AI Snap That? I am your host, Michael Rollins, and I am joined as always by my co-host, Thanos, he of the Snapdom. We are here to help you navigate your future as your robotic overlords, put you out to pasture, and take your job. Thanos, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm super excited about the imminent death of the penny.
Of the pen?
Did you hear about this?
Oh, the
The
pen. Oh, are
penny.
we really? Is this a thing? We're not going to do the
Yeah,
penny anymore?
it's
When is the penny
happening,
going to
baby.
drop?
The big dude said that he's directed the Treasury to stop producing pennies. So I'm super
This
excited.
will
Don't ask me when's the last time I touched a penny, but it just seems
right?
ridiculously
Well, I mean,
dumb.
to be fair, the pennies are worth more because of their metal than their actual value. So there's that. But
Apparently, a nickel is also worth 14 cents if you scrap it. So they should really get rid of that. But I think dimes are only like 5 or
okay,
6 cents, and quarters are 14
okay.
cents to make.
Well, I mean, I could go find some nickels. Just put them in a pot, melt them down. Is that we're not supposed
I believe that's illegal. I didn't try ask the newest models, should we get rid of the nickel and the dime, and they're generally
to?
very
Okay,
encouraging.
excellent.
They said the dime is okay because we're
Mhm.
still making money on it, and if you got rid of it, it's going to put pressure on the quarter. But like the
This
nickel
is
and the
how they
penny
get
can
you, though,
go.
Thanos. They take away the cash. They're going to start with the penny and move their way up until all we can do is use our credit cards and that will become the number of the beast.
I think the AI is going to be generating paper clips, so we're going to be
That
trading
actually,
paper
have
clips.
you ever heard of the paperclip problem?
Is that when you tell the AI to make
No,
more
the
efficient paper clips?
paperclip problem is when you tell the AI to protect humans from themselves. And so the AI eventually decides that the only way to protect humans from themselves is to turn them all into paperclips.
It's a similar thing where the optimization becomes just making
Yeah.
more paper clips, and civilization is eclipsed because the AI is just producing more paper clips, which,
I mean, it would certainly,
given the amount of less and less paper that we use, why do we
yeah.
still make paper
Um,
clips?
I don't know if you, oh, I know why we still make paperclips. Have you ever seen a law office?
I have, yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
this the when I've been doing this case, it's like I'll just sit there and I'll look at it. I'll be like, "So wait, you want me to travel and you've given me approximately 20 pounds of paper to do it with? What am I supposed to do? I got whole boxes of just paper and it's code.
I
Yeah,
do
it's
not
incredible.
understand.
Anyways, yeah, speaking of models, we had a very exciting announcement just like literally a few minutes before we started taping. Anthropic has released Claude Opus 4 and Claude Sonnet 4. Their claims are that Claude Opus 4 is the single most capable coding model of all time until next week when Google or OpenAI will release the single most capable coding model of all time. And then Sonnet 4 is quote unquote a lot better. That's not quote, but much, much better than Sonnet 3.7. Both of them are tool users. Both of them have mixed ability, so they can both reason and do extended reasoning, but also have the equivalent of one shot where they answer immediately. And they will select depending on their confidence in their answers. Let's see. There's also the announcement of there were some other things. Let's see.
Shall we
Yeah,
take it one
let's
at a
take it one
time?
at a time.
Because I asked the new model, it was
Okay.
a Sonnet 4, and I asked it, do you think we should kill the diamond and nickel? And at the end, the AI said, and what do you think? When's the last time you used some diamonds and nickels? So I ignored it and asked some follow-up questions. And the other is, how is this impacting you? And I'm like, dude, I'm asking the questions over here.
Huh.
This is not conversation. Stop asking back. But I thought that was kind of weird. Is it
It's asking.
programmed to try to engage me more like
Interesting.
it?
I've not seen that before. I mean, the best I get is like I'm part of the OpenAI program where they'll put up multiple responses and say, which one do you like the best? But, and they also give you a million tokens, which is why I'm part of the program. Million tokens like per day. So we've not, in my own engine room, we've not spent anything on OpenAI tokens recently. Yeah, that's interesting. So it's engaging you with a question.
Yeah, I think it thinks it's my friend. And it's like, okay, I mean, I guess we could be friendly, but I'm not going to ask you
So I
questions.
actually, we're totally veering off topic now. Sorry. We've been in this for approximately 5 minutes, and here we go. So OpenAI does a security briefing, right? Where they go in and they say, these are the things that we see as dangers as we develop, these artificial intelligence LLMs as we approach AGI. And what was really interesting is for the longest time they had persuasion on the list. That persuasion, that models that were good at persuading people were dangerous, meaning they would, like, if the model was really good at convincing you that the answer was wrong, that's a dangerous model, right? Well, recently they re-released this thing and they took persuasion off the list. And was really, it coincided at the same time with the super obsequious ChatGPT 4.0 or 4.1 or whatever it was, where it, did you run across this at all? I think you did because you told me about it, where it was like, that is the best idea I've ever seen. Oh my God, you are
Yes.
a brilliant thinker, right? And so they took persuasion off the list as soon as they fixed that. And I heard there's a podcast that I listen to. I think it's called like AI Daily or something. A really good podcast. I highly recommend it. I'm going to go ahead and look up the name so I get it right. Last Week in AI. And they do current events with AI. It's a really useful podcast. And so basically, what they do, they were saying that it's probably not coincidental that they took it off the list at that point and that they still believe a persuasive AI is a dangerous AI. So it was, one of them's a security researcher for AI. It was a really interesting podcast to listen to. So,
Isn't it too late for that though? Because worry, like our little lizard brains, are already influenced by what we see on the web and on social media and everything else. So we probably past that, especially as more and more of the content that gets generated is AI generated. I mean, the impact can be pretty
oh,
subtle.
absolutely.
If OpenAI wanted to maliciously insert
Hmm.
certain slants into the models,
Yeah.
then they could, basically control a lot of content that gets generated using the models or gets improved using the models. And it doesn't need to be like in your face, it doesn't need to be
Well,
blatant. It can be quite subtle if you're looking for long-term impact
and
across
that's
large
the
numbers
thing.
of people, say
You heard
affecting
about
elections or something like that.
the experiment that ran on these group of researchers ran bots backed by one of the LLMs in the convince me I'm wrong or change my mind subreddit. And they were like 64 to 65% effective, whereas the general populace, it was 50-50. And so they were going in changing
Okay.
minds at a higher rate than the humans were, which is like number one, Reddit was pissed. Because look, you're not supposed to do that. But number two, it is concerning, right? So, anyways, what was our next thing?
Yeah. Hard
Yeah.
to bet against the AI.
Oh,
We
I was
got
going to
Sonnet.
say they introduced model support in Claude Code, but they've also introduced extensions for VS Code and JetBrains. If I'm Cursor, I am really concerned right now.
Yeah, what if you're a windsurf and you just got acquired by for a few $1 billion?
Sucks to be OpenAI.
You just made
I mean,
it.
this has been the obvious play the whole time, right? It's, oh, you want people to use this thing? Oh, you like this feature in your in your IDE? Here, we'll just build an extension for you, and it,
Yeah.
it's a no-brainer.
And it doesn't seem that these tools are particularly sophisticated yet, right? They're fairly straightforward models that have certain instructions of how to interact with a user and do things back and how to
Hmm.
control a few tools. What was it that we were looking at? Was the leaked cursor prompts that we were looking at the other day. And I read through those and there's a couple thousand lines. And it's not really that super interesting. It's like basic stuff that we do every day. So I'm super curious to see
Hmm.
how that plays out. My current favorite tool as of the last few weeks, Rue, is getting the number 4 models from Anthropic built right now. I was just looking at, and they had added Anthropic 4, changelog generation, and a couple things. I'm hoping that gets released soon so we can
Well,
play with that. But yeah,
Rue
there's
was
a
the one that I still think there's something really interesting there because baked into the IDE is like the concept you were talking about over the past few weeks of the context file, the summarization, like that it's just automatic. And I think that is a novel approach that I have not seen elsewhere, and I think it's very useful.
they have this
Hmm.
orchestration mode that you can do some things and then feed the right context into the next mode. So you can orchestrate, ask it to do a few things, and then it will say, okay, I'm ready to go to coding mode to build this thing. We played with this in the last AI Code Foundry plug, and it was kind of okay, but it wasn't that great because we were discussing this, like, probably humans are still slightly better
Hmm.
orchestrators, and you have an idea how your project wants to go, and then you can break it up and have it in one file, and it's easier to manage in a file than having to go back into Rue and say, okay, go back to this checkpoint because this didn't work, or restore to where you were here, or I want to switch modes and go to that mode. So it's conceivably still easier to manage using a single context file that you manage yourself, and then you ask the AI to update that file as you go along.
There's also the Claude Code SDK, which actually I think is kind of exciting because now you can include all of the tool use and whatnot from the Claude Code command line tool into an agent that you're building. And I keep coming back to this idea, and I just don't have time to go play with it. Is the whole, and I found a project where somebody had done this, where you have the coder and then you have the critic, and so the coder does a bunch of stuff, and then the critic effectively does a code review on the coder, and as a result, you can end up with a loop where this thing's actually writing effective code. And I think that this type of SDK would be super useful in that. But
Yeah, it really depends on how good the critic can
right.
become over time, right? Because right now, if you let it go for too long
Hmm.
by itself,
Yeah.
it's pretty crap. So I wonder if, in the same way that AlphaGo has the
Hmm.
player and the critic and the judge, if this eventually gets good enough where the bootstrapping
Hmm.
works. Right now, I'm not sure I trust it, especially if you'd let it run for a little while and then you come back and it's ten
Well,
dollars later. No, this direction is
so
not
the
good.
that does bring me to that was the point is, if you're using Claude 4 Opus, it's $15 per million tokens input, and I think it was $75 per million tokens output, which you might as well set money on fire in
That would
that
be
that
ouch.
situation.
I mean, if it's really good, that's
Right.
not sort of
Yeah.
insane
Yeah.
pricing. But we will have some
Yeah.
input on this on the next podcast once Rue finishes
Hmm.
compiling with this. I'm curious to
Hmm.
install the new tools. I'm also curious to go play with something like Windsurf and see what's the hype about that. It was a funny side story. I was running the Beta Breakers race, which is
Hmm.
a foot race here in San Francisco, and it was
Hmm.
sponsored by Windsurf. So it had Windsurf written all over, but they only had the logo or the name. So I sent some photos to my mom, and she's, oh, that was I ran it
Hmm.
with my kids, and she's, I didn't know your kids could windsurf. I'm like, no, that's just the sponsor. But it was super weird because I don't think a lot of people understood what that is for. I mean, it's definitely like a tech crowd here in the Bay Area, but it was an interesting kind of
Yeah.
sponsorship.
I was looking for the pricing information. I had just found it. It was Claude 4.
And my guess is pretty
Yeah, it was
similar.
like $3 and $15 input output for Sonnet 4, and I do think it was like 15.75 for Opus 4. But that's still a significant amount of money. So, anyways, really interesting stuff here. Anything else?
There's this one other company that they were pitching this Devon. They were pitching this is the AI engineer, right? And they were charging me like $500 for it. And I think they're the commentary now is they're doing similar things to everything else, and just the pricing was like way too expensive because everyone else selling
Yeah.
it for $20 or $30, and 100 is ridiculous for something you have to guide just
Hmm.
as much as you need to guide your AI interns.
I will say this. I had a conversation with someone from one of the front end, the true vibe coding sites where you tell it what you want to do and it just does it all, right? And apparently their revenue is like over $1 million a day. And I was just like, my God. But I still wonder if they're losing money because
No, I think $1 million a day is how much I'm going to make when the companies that have built their software using vibe coding are going to start calling me to clean it up.
yeah, I still have the reel that I put out about Sean saying, vibe coding, this is whatever. And I still get comments on a daily basis. They're like, I am really looking forward to when I become a very expensive debugger. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Look, there's definitely the job is
Yeah,
for sure going to
it is.
change, but
It's already changed.
there's things you learn in engineering school that are
Mm-hmm.
useful that the AI hasn't gotten a hold of yet.
Well,
Did we chat about
we
Johnny
did
Ive?
not. Fill us in on
That's
that one
exciting.
because I saw it tertiarily, but
Yeah, so Johnny Ive had a company
mhm.
called Love From that was a design firm with a lot of design luminaries, and they recently started one called IO that was trying to look at how the hardware
Right.
stuff they're making was going to intersect with AI and make delightful
Yeah.
devices like your MacBook Pro with no ports on it. Um,
I will never forgive Johnny Ive for the butterfly keyboard ever.
I had one of those and it wasn't so bad. I really was annoyed when they got rid of the MagSafe plug. That was really cool. And that saved my laptop several
Yeah.
times. And when I'm not sure I had one, I think I might have had one with a just USB.
Hmm.
That was just annoying. It was really
Yeah.
nice to see the MagSafe port come back. So, anywho, IO and now
Hmm.
OpenAI merged, and now they're looking together to build the next generation of really cool hardware devices that
Okay.
you can interact with. On the coattails of Humane, that was possibly not the best start, but it's exciting. I think there's interesting
Hmm.
things that can come out of that I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to. On the announcement, Sam Altman had the question of, hopefully you cannot hear this, but there's a car
Oh,
alarm going off right outside my window.
no. Only when you're talking can I hear it.
Excellent. But they had the announcement with Sam Altman and
Hmm.
Johnny Ive chatting, and they were discussing how if you wanted to ask a question
Hmm.
of OpenAI, you need to pull your phone
Right.
out and run an app and do something, and it's kind of awkward. So it's exciting to think of the next generation. Take Humane and do that well. I have a Siri
Hmm.
house right now, so it's kind of weird because she's more or less useless. My daughter is talking to Siri in a deep voice to simulate myself to get her to
Hmm.
actually do anything. There's some funky stuff happening. But Alexa, even my really crappy old Alexas are now beginning to get AI
Yeah.
features in there. So it'll be nice to see how we combine the voice assistants with something that maybe you can carry with you. That is hopefully maybe iPhone gets something
Good.
along those lines soon, and you can interact with the AI in much more
Yeah.
clever ways.
And I think I mentioned it before, but at the beginning of the pandemic, I started dealing with some neck issues, which made it virtually impossible for me to look at a phone on a regular basis. And I started really interacting with my phone through audio. And so I'd have an AirPod in and I'd try to talk to the lady that lives in my phone. It was horrible. But there were so many reasons it is an awesome interaction model. And I still think that the only ones who have come close to hitting on it are Meta. Even with, I rock them. Yeah, yeah. Have
Meta?
you ever used their glasses? Dude,
No,
the people consider those glasses life-changing. Yeah,
really. You own a
I
pair of
I
Meta
do
glasses?
not because my prescription's too bad. They can't make my lenses, right? Like it's my prescription is
Did you put them over grandpa style
I
as glass
don't
over
want to do
glass?
that. Sounds awful. But yeah, no, Meta, all the interactions are through voice. You might have a little tap thing that you do, but that's it. And it will do reliably what you ask it to do. Now, interestingly enough, it's a lot better on Android phones than it is on iPhones because Apple locks everything down. But the way that they've integrated the AI with the Meta glasses makes them very useful. And so that is,
How much dough do I have to drop to get AI glasses from Meta?
yeah, if you
299.
don't need
Not too
specialized
bad.
lenses, it's not awful. It's $300, I think.
But there's nothing in the glass that has anything to do with augmented
No,
stuff.
no,
It's just basically just
the
glasses.
augmentation is audio. Yeah,
It's all audio.
so but it has a camera, right? And it can see what's in front of you. It can describe what's in front of you.
Oh, interesting.
One of my sons.
Man, that is nice, but super
Okay,
creepy
but
coming
all
from
right.
Meta.
Yes. Apparently, I did buy a pair at one point to see if I could use them at all, and I ended up it's not going to work for me, at least not in this iteration. But if the camera goes on, like this light pops up, and if you cover that, it refuses to turn the camera on. It's very difficult to creep shot.
Could be for me, not for everyone looking at me. It's just creepy that it's seeing and recording and doing stuff to what I see. Can you
Yeah,
get
you
those
can.
prescription?
You can.
That could be a worthwhile
Yeah.
experiment just to
The
play.
price does go up quickly if you need to get a prescription. I put everything in for my prescription, but the one thing they don't do prisms, and I have a prism in both lenses. But like mine basically maxed out. I got to $700 and I started trying to add things, and they were like,
Ooh,
please contact us directly.
yeah. It's the standard pricing and then the contact
Yeah, I
sales.
hit contact sales pretty fast.
Ouch.
Yeah, so anyways, that's it. Yes,
That was
that
the
is the
news.
news. Tell us about, we were going to really flesh out some of the stuff we talked about last week, which is, how does this, we talked last week about how does this impact coding? So the inner loop and the outer loop. And now we're going to talk about how this really impacts the things around coding itself.
I want to start with a smoother segue though. Let's just start
Right.
from the inner loop for 1 second, because one of the things that's been really nagging at me for the past few weeks is the way that we interact
Mhm.
with agents is very generic with we're doing coding. Okay. Now there's very specific activities that you do in coding. So for example, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing nowadays is
Mhm.
web apps. When you're building a web app or a
Mhm.
web app feature, depending on what you're building, there's usually fairly specific ways that you would go about it, right? You might start and say, I'm going to start with a data model. Then you might say, I'm going to build like a mock page. Then I'm going to wire some resolvers or APIs. And then maybe I've written some tests or I'm going to write some tests afterwards in some ways. And I was thinking that maybe one of the things that we could use were agents that were more specific to particular workflows that you're doing, right? Because then they could get a lot sharper as how do these tool bases work. And if you're building a data model, there's 8 different ways to build it depending on what toolkit you're using, but a data model is a data model. And you could then focus the AI to do really small changes the human can understand, and then follow patterns that you have in your code base. So that was kind of my thought, and like it's fairly straightforward to build agents, so that might be a side project to go and play with, because that can then really get your inner loop to be really much more effective. Right now, I find myself, you ask it to do something, it will take 30 seconds, you can go check email and come back, and it's very sort of interrupt driven. Whereas if you could improve on that loop, you could get much more effective in what we're about to talk about, which is, okay, how do you make the overall
Mhm.
process around that better?
It does.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
100%.
So bubbling this then up back to more
Mhm.
of the outer loopy stuff. I've been finding myself, and I don't know, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. I've been finding myself more limited on context than on
Mhm.
coding, right? So I grab a feature that I have to build, and I can spit
Mhm.
it out pretty quick. But then I have to have, and again, I don't know if this is that I'm doing this more, but like these rework iterations, I feel I'm doing more of these. Maybe because I'm spitting out more code than I used to be spitting out. Maybe because it goes faster, you don't think it through as well as you used to do. But I often have to find out that something I did is either like a done like, oops, shoot, I didn't catch this. I should have caught this. I knew about this. But more frequently, it's something like, oh, this is how it's supposed to work. No, we didn't really talk about this in the meeting when we were
Mhm.
designing this feature. How should this work? And you're beginning to unearth more of these other questions that you have that then force you as an engineer to go gather context. It's okay, I need to talk to some other engineers of how we solve this problem generally. I need to go talk to these product managers and figure out how we should build this. And maybe the business owner for this feature has some thoughts. Have you been hitting anything similar to this?
Now, when you say context issues, do you mean the context window of the LLM, or do you mean the context of, like you were saying, the product owner or things like that? Okay.
More product context. Context in the sense of, as the engineer, I use context to translate these
Mhm.
vaguish requirements into very
Okay.
precise code.
Yeah.
Because I think we as engineers, like I think the role of the engineer is often misunderstood. Is like we take very concrete things and make them into more concrete things. I think most of the time we don't do that. We have a fairly vague specification, whether even if it's written and it's okay, this is what you
Mhm.
do in all these cases, it's usually less precise than code is
Mhm.
because code has to handle every absolute exception.
Right.
Otherwise, you literally crash. And I think the role of the engineer is to take that fairly
Mhm.
broad context that they have. They understand what the product is in their company that they're working on. They understand how things
Right.
generally ought to work. They generally
Mhm.
understand users, and they take that and translate it into concrete code. And sometimes they have to go back, ask questions. They can say, hey, what did you mean here? Do you want it to work this
Mhm.
way or that way? And good engineers know when to bubble up and ask the question. And sometimes they might be able to say, I know how this is supposed to move. I can make a reasonable assumptions here and sort of interpret the spec. So that was my very long way of what I
So,
meant by context.
because of the nature of the projects that I'm working on recently, most of them I am the holder of the context, and to a degree, I am the product owner. And so that is not something I encounter on those. Now, there is one project, that I work on with you where occasionally I just biff on the context because it's about airplanes and I'm not a pilot. Right? And I'll be like, what the hell is this? And then I make a best guess and I'm wrong. Right? So I have run into that recently. But what's interesting is I've noticed my PM friends on LinkedIn, a lot of them are talking about, well, I went and tried Lovable, I went and tried Replit, blah, 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 blah. And so I put a post up. I was like, hey, to my PM friends, how many of you are using these vibe coding tools and why? And to a T, every single one of them said something along the lines of, I am able to bring the idea in my head into concrete existence, which I can then pass off to an engineer to do it right.
Yeah, and I'm hoping they're passing the user interface as in make it look and work like this, as opposed to the
I
code that says
I am unable I
make
am
it run
unable to
like this.
comment on that. But when I say make it right, that's what I mean is let's not release the
Yeah,
AWS keys to prod.
yeah, and I think that's exactly the right approach, right? Where it really helps to have the AI as something that makes it concrete for the product manager. I've had it really useful to describe a feature and have it think through what needs to happen here. It is very eager. It's very happy to point out things like, yeah, we're never going to do that. We're never going to do this. But oh, but that was a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. Let me like
Yeah.
pick on this a little bit. And that was kind of my next thought with running with this, which is, can we start leveraging the AI to help us with these context issues, right? Where it can go and figure out what other pieces are we missing? Who else has this context? And the tools right now are a little basic. I like a tool that interacts
Hmm.
with Asana. So I
Hmm.
use Asana for a project, and I can tell Asana if I'm feeling super lazy, go look at the Asana task. Sorry, I'm telling my agent, use the MCP server for Asana, go figure out this particular Asana task, and then let's plan it out and let's write it. And it was actually quite good because the other day I had a question for the product owner because the AI did it in a certain way. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. Like, probably we should do it this way, but I don't remember reading the spec anywhere that said we should do it this way. So I went and asked the product owner, and they're like, dude, I put this in Asana. And then I went to the task and read it a couple times and I couldn't find it. It's like, where is this? It was there. Like, it was bolded and it was like as a heading, and my eyeballs were
Hmm.
somehow skipping over the heading. But the AI saw it, wrote it, and went better than me and implemented it
Hmm.
correctly. There's interesting things that can
Yeah.
happen with that. And I'm curious as to whether we can get broader context to get these things. You showed me a tool the other day, Open
Yeah.
Memory.
Yeah, it
That is
is.
super interesting.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you want to
So,
tell everyone what
Open
Open Memory is
Memory,
about?
and I'll put the link in the show notes. Open Memory is a GitHub repo that effectively stands up a RAG MCP server for your coding tools. And so the idea is whenever something happens in the code, it saves the context of what just happened, the branch it happened on, everything into the RAG database. And so you have this running searchable set of contexts that are readily available to the coding tool. And I'm fairly certain it works beyond just like coding. It really does feel a little bit like the every brain that I always fantasize about, that I can go and say, please tell me what I have to do today because I'm pretty sure I don't remember half of it. But it really is a very interesting tool and is also on my list of things that I would like to implement and try to use. So,
Yeah, it says it's implemented as
yeah.
an MCP server, so I'm not sure if you can use it. Can you add an MCP server to
Yeah.
just ChatGPT or
Yeah.
Claude straight
Look,
up? Oh,
look,
I've
look.
never done that. I've only added them in my
No,
ID.
Claude Code does MCPs. You can add MCP servers by default. That's what, yeah.
No, not in Claude
But
Code, in Claude
yes, in
Claude
Claude
Chat.
you can do it as well. I don't know about ChatGPT, but in Claude there you do have the ability to add running MCP servers to the desktop app.
Learn something new every day.
And what's interesting, I've read a few folks who talk about how, these are folks that are not super technical, but they figured out how to stand up their own MCP servers for these tasks they do all the time. Kind of like what you were saying for Asana. And they end up doing the majority of their work in Claude Code as, with the MCP servers doing the actual work.
Yeah, so I wonder, can we throw in an MCP server for Slack? That now it has all the context from our team discussions. Can we also throw in
Yep.
one for email? And now this thing is going to start pulling it together from different
Yep.
places.
You sure can.
The yeah.
Yeah.
Is this one the Open Memory, the one mem0.ai, or is this a different one that you have
Uh,
come across? Because when I punched in Open Memory, it came up with a hosted version that's
let
20
me
bucks a month
see.
or 250 bucks a month, depending how much
I'm
you want.
trying. I got to go back and find where did I send this to you? Let's see. We didn't
Probably
mention
text.
that the Claude prompt leaked. That was
Yeah, that
fun.
was fun.
I think I might have sent it to you in Slack. Hang on.
I also want to know if anyone knows whether those 1 or 2,000 lines that the prompt has in there, that's a
Yeah.
decent amount of tokens. Are you paying for that every time, or is
Yeah, because it
Claude
was
eating
what,
that every time?
24,000 tokens, I think is what somebody said.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
fair number. Yeah,
I can't find the open memory thing,
we
but
should ask
let
Claude that.
me. Oh,
We can throw it in the
yeah.
show notes after the fact.
Mem0, introducing open memory. Memory
Yeah,
MCP server for cross application AI. Oh, that's interesting. So it'll also do cross application stuff, which is very useful.
how do you charge 250 a month and call it open? Like, I think this, if you call it something open,
Because
it
you
should
can
just
run
be a,
because it also it's
or you
open
can run it
source.
locally.
Yeah, it's open source, so you can just download this and run this on your own, which is
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
which is
unlimited
obviously
memories.
what
Okay,
we would be doing.
another project. Yeah, I'm not paying 250 a month. The 20 month, if it's good, it's
Oh
in that
wait, is
category
it
of
two
time
hundred and
saving
fifty
things.
dollars a month?
The 50,000 memories that I'm seeing here is 20 bucks a month, and the Pro, which is unlimited memories, is 250. They also have 5 versus 50,000 retrieval calls. The expensive one has a private Slack channel, graph memory, advanced analytics, multiple projects.
Yeah, there is literally a Mem0 open memory GitHub. It makes me wonder if we should snag this repo as fast as we can. Let me see what the license
Before
is.
you can.
Apache license version 2.0.
All right, I'll be running
Yeah,
this later
baby,
this
me
afternoon.
too. Let's see. Yep. You can use it. Yeah, it's fully open source, man. What will very likely happen is they're going to stop developing on that particular branch at some point, or that particular project. That's what happened. Did you know that's what happened with 11 Labs? Did you ever hear the story?
No, they went closed source and they abandoned
So
the open source.
the original founders of 11 Labs, and the story may not be completely accurate because I can't remember There's two founders, and then there was the engineer that joined, and the one of them had maintained this GitHub repo called, I think it's Coqui TTS. It had a frog, and it was the preeminent text to voice thing. And he came out and was like, "Hey, listen, I'm done doing this, on this. I'm going to take my stuff. I'm working for a new company, blah, blah, blah." And then 6 months later, Open 11 Labs popped up. And that's what they had taken that as a start. So it was pretty intriguing. But
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
going back to your context question. I will say this. One of the You and I both know this, which is that one of the defining characteristics of a great software engineer versus a good software engineer is that oftentimes great software engineers either just know the context innately or know how to get it, and more importantly, when to get it. And I think that you're really onto something here, because if there is an agent or something that's like sitting over to the side and can, number one, produce the context in a manner that helps the engineer understand it better, or even produces the context to then inform the coding agent how to do its job, or is able to kind of correct the software engineer if they start getting off the rails and saying, "Hey, listen, this is not what they were asking for. This is what they were asking for over here." I mean, that turns your good engineer who struggles with the context into a great engineer.
Yeah, maybe,
Maybe.
right?
All right, fine. You're so pessimistic
Yeah.
about people, damn it, Thanos.
No, the reason that I
Hmm.
say this is that I wonder if the skills that enable engineers to deal with
Hmm.
ambiguity and go get the
Yeah.
context that they need, if they, okay, so let's say you solve that problem and gave them the context that they need, if there's some other related skills that make you a good engineer, like it's not just a matter that you're missing the context, now you got the context. It's like the skills that make you good at getting context make you good at other things as well, and they're
Hmm.
engineering things as well. So that'll be an interesting experiment as these things
Yeah,
develop.
but well, all right. So taking a step back from that, there is probably, you're right. There's probably some kind of underlying set of soft skills that informs the behavior of keeping or getting the context correctly, right? But the action itself is almost, is it intuitive or can it be procedural, right? Is there, right now, if you're in a good code base, when you try to commit, it'll run tests before you allow it to merge to main. Is there a world in which, as opposed to letting you just willy-nilly do things, it will double check the context and see if you appropriately applied your understanding of the context to the code you wrote?
Yeah, it's like the cockpit of the future. In the future airplane, there'll be a pilot and a dog, and the pilot will be there to supervise that the autopilot is flying correctly, and the dog will be there if the pilot tries to touch anything.
Yes, it really does.
So I can see the AI attached with a cattle prod. So no, you're not coding here. You're just looking over me.
I do think, though, I think if we ended up with some kind of like context aware agent in the manner you're talking about, I do think that's a pretty significant step towards maybe we don't need engineers anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's where we might start seeing some
Hmm.
standardization coming down. In that, if you have good AI that can write the code, and the code now is not it's not your canvas that you paint as an artist, right? But it's more like, okay, this is what it does. Do we need like 8,000 different front end
Yeah.
frameworks? Or could we just have one front end framework that the AI knows really well, and now we just need to know how to
Well,
control that one? And it doesn't matter if it's like a little more complicated than our frameworks before, because you got rid of everything because the AI can handle more complicated, and that's
I
okay.
do think Sean,
And there's one way of doing testing, and there's one way of doing data models,
something
and so on.
Sean said way back in the day, which I actually think he's right, is maybe we won't have a single way to do front end, but it won't matter, because that is just something that the AI handles for us. Is, as long as it works, as long as it's performant, right? And as long as it does what you told it to, do you care what it's implemented in?
I can kind of see the trade-off there, but I think I've been dealing with this in practical terms. Like I've been doing some
Okay.
form stuff recently. And forms, if you're doing it in HTML, there's 1,000 different
Yeah,
freaking ways
there
of
are.
doing forms. And the AI struggles because it doesn't know which
Hmm.
way you're doing
Yeah.
forms in this project. So that's where I'm thinking, like, forms are forms. Like, I could make me one way of doing forms, and that would capture 99% of all forms use cases on the freaking planet. So could we just have one and then have the AI be really well at this one? And that's also all I need.
Actually,
But every framework is opinionated. And it's, oh, well, we reduce all this boilerplate code because you can do it this way, and it's easier. But I don't care for easy right now because the AI does it for
you
me.
know
So
where
I
you're
just want it
going with
standard.
this? Distilled models, where you take a larger model,
Yeah.
you set your coding standards, you set up a distillation process where the agent or the model that pops out is not the larger model. What it does is it writes the code that is part of the distillation process. Yeah.
That could be it. I was also playing with OpenAI APIs recently, and they have ways to over their APIs to fine tune existing models. So that
Are
sounds like a lot
those
of fun.
the, what are they called? Something GPT? Yeah, there's ways that you can build custom GPT.
No, not the agents.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not custom GPT. It looked like you literally could fine tune them. I mean, they use the words fine tuning, which I think has a
Okay.
very specific meaning. So my guess is you could send it other question answer
Yeah.
pairs in some amount, and you can then take some
Hmm.
of the models and literally fine tune the weights on top of that. I haven't checked in the pricing of that, so I should probably do that before I start clicking around over there.
All of a sudden, why is there a $300 bill for OpenAI over here? What's going on?
Yeah, 300 would suck,
Yeah.
but it'd be okay. Okay, why is there a
Yeah,
three
that's
hundred
going to be
thousand dollar
bad.
bill?
That's going to
Like,
be
oh,
bad.
yeah.
All right. Well, anything else for today?
No, I think for me this seems like a super sort of exciting subject, and
Yeah.
it's kind of meta. It really affects the end results, because you can code all you want, but until you ship features
Mhm.
to your users that realize value, that's where the
Yeah.
cash flows to your business. That all the coding stuff doesn't really matter. So I'm super interested in how that aspect develops and how we can
Hmm.
leverage these new tools to ship valuable
Yeah.
features.
I agree. I think there's, just because coding is, I'm not going to say solved, but just because coding seems to be the main use case for all of these LLM tools, that's just the first step. And I think that you're right. We're going to get a lot of new things popping up that maybe nobody expects. Because I hadn't even thought about what you were talking about. It makes a lot of sense. I just don't know how to build it. Maybe we should build it, Thanos. Feels like there's a lot of money right there.
I was set to play and start playing around with some agents that do my bidding for the specific types of
Okay.
coding that I do. So that could be
Yeah.
maybe a place to start.
All right.
But yeah, it is exciting things happening ahead. And while we were talking, Rue has a new version that includes the Sonnet 4 version. So that's going to make
All
my
right. I
afternoon
think I'm gonna.
coding session
I decided.
much perhaps
Yeah,
more
I
interesting and
decided today
expensive.
I'm moving to Rue, so that'll be interesting.
Well, now there's Claude tools, so maybe that's
Oh, do
premature.
those not work in Rue?
No, I'm saying the VS
Claude.
extensions
That's
for
what I meant.
Claude may be
Oh,
replacing. Who
oh,
knows?
all right. That's then maybe I won't be
So
using
I'll
Rue
install
because
those
I
and
may
see
just
how
go
they
back to
compare.
default VS Code. Who knows, man? All right. Humans
Who
above.
knows? I don't think I've had the same tool for more than 2 weeks,
Yeah, well,
3
like I
weeks, at this
said,
point in time. So
Claude 4 Opus is currently the best model for coding until next week. I mean, I just want to reflect on that. These coding, these models take hundreds of millions of dollars to develop, and they are obsoleted so fast. It's just
yep,
bonkers. All right.
it's going to be exciting
Woo!
times
Until it's
ahead.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see.
All right. And with that, humans of Earth, thank you for coming along today on Will AI Snap That? I am your host, Michael Rollins, along with my co host, Thanos, he of the Snapdom. We appreciate you for being here. Subscribe, comment, share. And with that, we will see you next week. Goodbye.